Hold it. Preparing to live stream the meeting. One second, wait. Here we go. Now we got it. Here you go. Now it's being live streamed.
Are you okay?
Now it's being live streamed.
There's still no link though.
A link with what?
Yeah, okay.
Are we ready?
Good.
Who's
Let's start off with Rabbi Krinsky, if you may.
okay? But are we ready? Yeah.
We are ready.
So Mazel Tov, everybody. It's indeed a very, very big yontif for Chabad, and hopefully for the Rebbe for whom we serve, And I heard just a while ago that we have a big book sale for Teves, one of the largest book sales of the year. And the store that on Eastern Parkway, you have to, it's a large store, but it's full of people from last night. And you really have to wait to get in. It's so crowded. And I heard from Rabbi Friedman, in charge of Kohos, that other booksellers in the city, not affiliated with Chabad, made Hey Teves a book sale. So it's becoming sort of a universal holiday. Is that Lisa? Yeah. Hi.
Yes. Hi. Yes.
And that I haven't seen you for a long time, and the others.
Book sale.
Hi, Seth, and Steve.
Bob Parker.
Bob Barker.
Bob Parker, yeah.
Rabbi Kunin.
Yes.
And it's
Rabbi Zaklikowski.
Rabbi Zaklikowski. Yeah, welcome everybody. I don't really know where to start. My involvement in the Teves is from the very instant that it began, and I'll try to bring you up to date to things you may not know of the history of Hey Teves before it became the tremendous holiday that it. In the month of Tammuz, in 1985, the Rebbe spoke publicly about a theft of books from the previous Rebbe's library, and with great pain was visible only one time in all the years that the Rebbe's talk. You could visit behind the talk there was pain. It was very upset, and it became a very for Chabad people. It became a very, very big problem. What was going on? We found out who the thief was. It was a nephew of the Rebbe, Barry Garari, and he had already stolen more than 400 volumes that he had at his home in New Jersey, and he was selling them on the open market to antique Jewish books collectors, and some of it in Kanabla, and it was really very, very painful. Everybody, Lubavitch Chassidim felt becoming aware of what the terrible catastrophe we're suffering. And the Rebbe spoke that Agudas Chabad is the owner, the organization of Agudas Chassidim Chabad is the owner of the library, and they should their members, their officers, and their members should do something to get the books back. And that was on Shabbos in Tammuz, and Sunday I was on the board of Agudas Chabad from many years before the Rebbe put me on as the secretary of Agudas Chassidim Chabad. And I felt I was the youngest of them, the youngest member of the board of Agudas Chabad. Was old enough to be my grandfather, but the Rebbe put me on, and I decided to call a meeting on Sunday, the next day, the day after that, Shabbos. And I called those that were in town. And I told them, look, you were with me together yesterday. You saw the Rebbe and you heard the Rebbe. It was really very painful just to watch his agmas nefesh. So I called about 5 of them together, and we met in the room in 770 Eastern Parkway at headquarters. And I said, look, Imonu Hayisim, we were together yesterday. You all heard and saw what I heard and saw. We have to do something. And again, painfully, they were much older than I. I don't think they were as bothered as I was. And they couldn't come up with any idea, any plan to speak to people, certain people that maybe could do something about it. And I left the meeting very, very depressed. So the next night, I called our dear friend, Nat Lewin, who was so successful in making Hanukkah a real Jewish holiday all over the world. That's not for now, but I tell you, Nat, God bless you and Elisa, your firm, including Seth Waxman, who was one of your workers, worked with you. What wonderful young man. Seth, I love you. And I decided to call the culprit, the thief, to a federal a court case. And Nat says I called him at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't think it was so late, but I was so beyond my mind. I was out of my mind. If I called you 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm sorry, but I think it was worthwhile. After all is said and done, God bless you, your family. And Nat said he was in Washington, but he was going to be in New York the next day, he said, fortunately. And the fact that it was taken out of state from New York to New Jersey makes it a federal case, which is much better than being a state case in New York City, New York State. B'kitzur, we met in Washington,
New York.
and the firm that the address that he gave me. And I had the credentials that we needed, the charter of Agudas Chassidic Chabad, and some other legal papers that are necessary to file a case. And we decided to call a case, to meet, go to visit Nat was going to visit the federal court in Brooklyn, in the Eastern District, and whatever judge will find. And we met the next day, and I didn't go to the court, but Nat went, maybe with some others. And they met, what was the name of the judge? Judge, you remember the name of it?
Charles Sifton.
No, that was the one who did that.
Sifton was away on vacation.
Yeah.
And
Glazer,
in
Glazer.
terms of getting an
Glazer.
order immediately, we had an assigned judge who took Sifton's place that day. A Jewish judge, whose name I never forget.
Leo Glazer. Leo Glazer was the judge.
Who?
Leo Glazer.
Glazer, right. And I recall being heartened by the fact that as we walked into Glazer's chambers, on the outside, the entrance was a framed page, original page of a Rambam, a printed first page of a Rambam that had been framed and put on the wall in his office, in his chambers. And we went in there to get a temporary restraining order because we filed a complaint that day. And there was this hanging on the wall in the outside entrance to his chambers.
He also
gave us a restraining order and an order that froze the sale of the books and prohibited any further sale of books from that library. Sifton was the judge who was assigned the case, but because he was on vacation that day, we had Glazer making that original ruling. And I recall the conversation that I had with Rabbi Krinsky in the middle of the night when I learned during the conversation, much to my pleasure, that Barry Garari lived in New Jersey so that we could go to federal court with the case. And at the first meeting, he or someone who represented Chabad brought me a copy of a page from the Choshen Mishpat, which says that if you're suing somebody who will not listen to a din Torah or the result of a din Torah, you can go to a secular court. And that was brought to me to establish, to my satisfaction, that it would be halakhically permissible to go to a federal court to sue Barry Garari. And I thought we were only going to be suing him, and then discovered the next day that his mother joined the lawsuit as a defendant, so that we ended up suing both Barry Garari and his mother for return of the books and for an injunction to prevent him from taking other books or selling them.
Yes. I remember he said, Judge Glazer said that he understands our position because he himself is a book lover, if you recall. So what happened was he granted the TRO, and
Okay, sorry again.
he was told that he's selling books in the open market to book dealers of Jewish antiquity all over the world in different countries, in Israel and in New York and some other countries in Israel. And we wanted him, we had to stop the bleeding immediately. So what happened was I believe he sent two court marshals to New Jersey, Barry's house. They found there 400 books that he had already taken, waiting to be sold, some of which already had been sold. And it was and these police, the court police, federal marshals took the books out from his house on that day. He couldn't sell them anymore, and they put them in a bonded warehouse. And that was had solo, not just had solaporte, it was a big safety valve. So if he couldn't sell any more books, the pressure got much less. And the next day, I hadn't asked the Rebbe to do this. I was so upset. I figured maybe the Rebbe didn't take him to court because he didn't want to. He was an uncle. Well, if he would have taken him, it could have been a scandal. You know, a family squabble, which was not the case. The case was it was somebody else's books, not his to take. And so I came. The next day I came to the Rebbe and I told him what I did. And he was silent while I was talking to him. And he said to me, and then I asked him a question. And he says to me in Yiddish, "Why are you asking me? You're a chassid of my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe." I didn't understand what the Rebbe meant. I was by, anyway. So the Rebbe says, ask me, "Did you ever receive a bracha from my father-in-law, the owner of the library?" And while I was thinking, he says, "You were by the Rebbe before your bar mitzvah in 1946." He remembered my bar mitzvah 40 years before, 50 years before, that I did get a bracha. You got a bracha? Mail with all sein beseder. Everything will work out fine. And then he told me something that was very, very enchanting. He says to me that Moshe Rabbeinu was the Nasi Yisrael. He was the head of the Jewish people. And he loved the Jewish people. But when it came to this matter of Pashas Pinchas, with Azimov, Zimri ben Salom, Moshe couldn't do it. It had to be done by Pinchas. What he was implying, actually, that he himself couldn't have done what I did. It had to be done by somebody else. So he can't imagine how that made me feel, a relief that I thought the Rebbe could have fired me for doing such a step, taking his nephew to court, federal court, and I didn't ask him permission, and so for him, he was very pleased with what I did. And from that day, the victory began. Nat Lewin came, and he came with Jerry Shestak, who later on, after the case, became the president of American Bar Association, which is probably how many millions of lawyers that he became president of. And the dates of the case, we don't have enough time to discuss it. It's available probably in writing, quite an arichos, at great length. And on Hey Teves, we won. It was very, very clear. And briefly, Garari appealed it, and about 11 or 12 months later, he got a ruling from 3 federal judges on the appellate court of the United States court, New York State court, and we eventually got the books back, and it was on Hey Teves that was the day, and that's what we're celebrating today.
It's taken many years, but finally, the United States has decided that on Hey Teves, there will not be any mail delivery. Many stores will be closed, and the country will celebrate on Hey Teves this year.
Not only Hey Teves, but Erev Hey Teves and the day after Hey Teves are federal holidays this year.
So if I may, there's a part of the story that's not known to many, and that is the story of Seth Waxman being able to make sure that the Rebbe would not have to testify in a deposition. If you can give us a little bit on that, Seth, that'd be great. We'd be grateful for that.
Let me say something before Seth.
And those messengers going to
Huh?
Okay.
What the Garari family decided that after we won on Hey Teves, the book trial, to take the Rebbe personally to court for something that happened at the time of the theft, was some crazy story. And the Rebbe got a request to give a deposition. The Rebbe never gave a deposition in his life, and he was not going to give one. You know how honorable a deposition can be. And we tried to fight it. Didn't work. And the Rebbe called me in at that point in time and told me that if I have to give a deposition, I'm ready to go. I told the Rebbe, I felt very strange. My Rebbe, the Rebbe's, I don't have to explain the greatness of the Rebbe, the greatest Jew of generations in Torah study and goodness. I just felt it's not going to happen. It just broke out. I said it in a loud voice. that I regret, but I had to do it. That's how it came out. I was not in control of myself. I told it up, it's not going to happen. And then the judge made the judge gave the case of that case to a magistrate by the name of Chrein, and he took over the case of the Rebbe, and Nat had one of his lawyers that worked with him, Seth Waxman, and he put Seth Waxman on it, and we went to those hearings as well, and it was what Seth Waxman he arranged. I don't know if it's another client in the world that can get out of a deposition, but the Rebbe did not have to depose. It was, to me, it was a miracle. By him was brains and
So
being
what
a
happened?
lawyer.
What happened was, since the Rebbe was a defendant in an assault suit, obviously under the federal rules, you're entitled to get the testimony of the defendant. But Rabbi Krinsky called me up. He said, "Look, the Rebbe doesn't testify in civil courts. The Rebbe doesn't leave Brooklyn except to go to the Ovel, and he's just not going to testify. And you have to find a way to prevent it." And I'm like, I don't know how we get out of this, but I put on evidence that the Rebbe had a propensity to something called sudden death syndrome, which afflicts a few people, which basically means in periods of great upset, they can suddenly die. And we got a doctor to testify about that. They called the head of the Medical College of New Jersey to testify that he could be protected and the deposition could be given under conditions. I called my closest friend from college, who was a world-renowned cardiologist and not Jewish, but a great fan of Yiddishkeit. I said, "Steve, we have the Lubavitcher Rebbe. They want to take his deposition. I have to be able to destroy this expert cardiologist and prove that it would be life-threatening." And he sent me books and articles about sudden death syndrome. And I took his deposition, and he wasn't prepared. I kept asking him how he could respond to this article and that article. He didn't have any answers. So we went to Judge Crane, and Judge Crane said, "Nope, it's too risky. You can't take his deposition." And that was the end of the case. And it was really because Rabbi Krinsky just said, "Look, I don't know how you do this. You're the lawyer, but the Rebbe is not going to tell you. He doesn't testify in secular courts, period. End of story. I don't want to discuss this anymore." I can't ignore a commandment like that.
For
Thank you very much. I
for
can.
that great victory, the issue came up also in the Hey Teves trial when Hellerstein, who was Barry Garari's lawyer, also noticed the Rebbe's deposition in that case. Now there, his testimony was very tangential because the question was, before he became Rebbe, who owned the books that his father-in-law had in Europe and had traded up in order to save him and send them to the United States to avoid destruction by Hitler. And the Hellerstein, who was Barry Garari's lawyer, not only noticed the deposition of the Rebbitzin, who was the daughter of the previous Rebbe, but also of the Rebbe. And on some broad theory of depositions, the Rebbe would have had to be deposed. And that became public. The fact that Hellerstein was seeking to take the Lubavitcher Rebbe's deposition. And we, quite frankly, were in a difficult state to try to oppose that deposition, unlike the deposition that Seth succeeded in quashing in the later litigation. But the public outrage about Hellerstein wanting to take the deposition and noticing the deposition of the Lubavitcher Rebbe was so great that the public outrage actually compelled Hellerstein to withdraw that notice of deposition, so that the Rebbe's deposition was not taken in the Book's case that resulted in a Teves.
And the Rebbitzins deposition,
The Rebbe's deposition, of course, was taken in their apartment, and that was the time when she made the very famous statement that said that the Rebbe himself belonged and was owned by the Hasidim, so that he personally did not really have any personal property.
Said that remark, I was sitting next to her at the deposition, and she took me, she said, his Tallis and Tefillin. He owned that.
Yeah.
That's all he, beautiful.
Well, she will tell you that in preparation for that deposition, I told her, when they ask you the questions in English, you should demand that they first be translated into Yiddish, and that will give you time to think of an answer to the question. She listened to me very carefully, and maybe with the first or second question, she asked that it be translated, and after that, she just dropped that request and answered the question directly when it was asked.
Yeah, she was close to 80 at that time, and she was a frail woman, but her mind was perfect. She was a very beautiful lady, and clear mind at her age, and under duress, under stress, there were 5 lawyers badgering her, and when they asked her that last question, Mrs. Schneerson, did your father own the books? And then she said, my father owned nothing. All that he owned belonged to Chassidim, including himself, except for the Tallis and Tefillin. It was very, very, very dramatic. And the other lawyers sitting on the other side of the next table just dropped. That was it. The whole thing finished then. There was no more questions. But it was over. They saw that they made a mistake. They should not have deposed her. Well, but when I told the Rebbe, after the time when I told him that it's not going to happen, it was another visit to the Rebbe where we spoke about the Rebbetzin. You know what he responded to me? She can be deposed. Leave her alone. She'll come through with flying colors. His certainty of her ability to say exactly what you couldn't say anything better. And it was silent. The living room, the Rebbe's house where the deposition took place, silent.
I would like to say, from the point of a person involved with the Rebbe's institutions, that across the entire world, the Hasidim would get together and pray with tears drawn from their eyes and crying out to the Almighty God, please help our Rebbe. This was hundreds of thousands of people that were praying to God. And then what happened when the miracle came about, it became a worldwide celebration. Thousands of people coming from the whole world. Why? Because our Rebbe is our life. That's what our Rebbe is. And today, the Rebbe continues to lead spiritually the Chabad Lubavitch movement with over 6,000 emissaries across the globe. And the important factor from all of this is the great, great belief that we have a Rebbe today, and we go forward today, more and more institutions, and this is what the Rebbe wants from us, and we do it with great happiness. And I have no words to thank the Budel and the lawyers, what you folks have done. What you have done, nobody else could have done. And you did it in a way where your whole life was given over to the Rebbe. So may God, Almighty God, grant all of you long, healthy, and happy years, and a lot of nachas from your children and grandchildren, and only good news.
Amen.
So
You-
one of the people who was involved, I guess, in Rabbi Krinsky's decision to call me, of all lawyers, was Zalman Gorari, who was the grandfather of a lady who we just did a webinar with for Hey Teves. Zalman Gorari and I had given him some legal advice, which he apparently thought was correct and liked me. He, I think, was involved in recommending my name to Rabbi Krinsky and to the Rebbe, and that's why I was selected. But Zalman Gorari said to me very prophetically then, Lewin, you are now have this case. If you lose this case, there is no place in the world that you will be able to travel to. You have to win this case, because if you lose it, you won't be able to go anywhere in the world.
Matt,
said
I must tell you that I had no connection with Zalman Garari in this matter. I knew him. He lived in Crown Heights, and he was one of the elders of Chabad. And but I didn't discuss any aspect of this case with him. So that is.
I think the Rebbe must have mentioned my name to the Rebbe too. So that's how the Rebbe knew about me.
Oh, the Rebbe knew about you from many other
I had
cases.
given some advice to Zalman Gorari.
I know about it. I
Now,
know Zalman very.
Nat, if I may, when we were arguing the case, now jumping forward with the Russia case, the Garari case got involved with the jurisdiction when the Russian government wanted to throw out the fact that the library belongs to the Rebbe, and they used the Garari case in that. How did that come up?
Well, they recognized, the DC court recognized the applicability and the validity of the decision of the Eastern District of New York that had been affirmed by the Second Circuit, and I think cert was denied, which said that the library, on approving what the previous Rebbe had said in his letter, that the library belonged to Agudas Chasidei Chabad. And just as the library belonged to Agudas Chasidei Chabad, the DC courts held that the books that the Russians had taken in World War II and had stored and had some taken to Russia, to Moscow, also belonged to Agudas Chasidei Chabad. And that's how we won the Agudas Chasidei Chabad claim in the DC court for the books that are being stored and held in Russia, which was the lawsuit that we brought, that was originally brought in Los Angeles by the Cunin family, and that had to be transferred to Washington under the jurisdictional provisions of federal law, which said that this kind of a claim had to be brought in the District of Columbia. So that's how I came into the case after it had initially been filed in California.
But at one point, the attorneys for the Russian government were saying that there was a footnote in Judge Sifton's ruling that his ruling only pertained to that books and collections that was before him. And they were trying to claim that the library that was in Russia does not come under that umbrella, and therefore there's no jurisdiction over that part of the library.
I think
Well,
we
happened
found it. I don't recall exactly how, but I don't recall any part of Sifton's opinion being limited and to that in that regard. But the DC court held that that ruling essentially applied to all the books that were in danger as a result of Nazi occupation.
Well, thank you, Nat. I do remember you telling the court that you won on all accounts in the Garari case, and if they try to pull, there was nothing for you to appeal on because everything you wanted from the Garari case you had, and therefore they had no case. The Russians had no case in being able to use that against Chabad in that fashion. Here we are, just a few days ago, we had the Supreme Court had come out with, I'm sorry, the Solicitor General's office came out with a support of Chabad in our case to the Supreme Court. And if I can turn to, I know Seth is, if Seth is still with us on the call.
Yeah, I'm here.
There you go. Okay, I know you're going to be heading out. You're on the plane.
I'm on the plane, but I can still talk.
As a former Solicitor General, what does it mean getting a case in front of the Supreme Court and the Solicitor General asking for the audience that's watching this? What does it mean getting a case out in front of the Supreme Court, getting the court to hear it, and the role that a Solicitor General would play into it?
Sure. Just in a nutshell, so the Supreme Court gets about probably 10,000 petitions a year for requests to hear a case. It's nowadays is granting review in about 75 cases only. So the chances of getting a petition granted are very low. In instances in which the United States is not a party, as is the case in our case against the Russian Federation, when the Supreme Court is puzzled about whether it should or shouldn't take the case, and they perceive that there may be national interests involved, they can do something called invite the Solicitor. It's called call for the views of the Solicitor General, which is to say, we're inviting the Solicitor General to file a brief as a friend of the court and advise us whether or not the United States believes that the court should grant review, and if so, why, and what the court should do with respect to the question presented. Now, in our case, and that's what the Supreme Court did in this case. They invited the Solicitor General to express the views of the United States. This was a great opportunity for us, but, as Steve and Bob know, a great challenge, because ever since 2004, the United States had been telling the Supreme Court in multiple cases that our view of the meaning of the expropriation provision was wrong. They had been taking positions directly opposite of the position that we're advocating. And so getting the Solicitor General to tell the Supreme Court, well, we've always told you before that there's no need for you to take the case because the DC Circuit is getting it right, was a big challenge. And it took the Solicitor General 6 months, almost to the day, to issue its brief in the case. But what the Solicitor General said was, We think you should take the case. We haven't, and we have previously taken a position on the merits that is the same as the Russian Federation and different than Chabad, but we are still thinking about this. We haven't decided whether our prior position was right, but you should take this case. And the Supreme Court is going to be considering whether or not to in fact grant review in its conference on January 9th. If the court decides to grant, we may hear that afternoon, which will be Erev Shabbos. We might also hear the next Monday, or they could put it off for another conference and wait to decide. In the meantime, we are about to file a supplemental brief, which will be filed at the end of the federal holiday declared by the president in honor of Teves, explaining why the Solicitor General is right and that it's terribly, terribly important for the court to take this case. After all, Chabad pursued its legal remedies to get the return of its books and records all the way through the Russian courts. We got a victory in the Supreme Court of Russia, and yet the government of Russia has renounced that decision and refused to give us any remedy. And the only forum in which we can get relief is in the United States Supreme Court. And I am hopeful that with all the prayers of worldwide Lubavitch and the prayers of all the preceding Rebbe's, may their memory be a blessing, we will get a grant of review. And when we do, we will bring this case to victory in the Supreme Court.
It's quite interesting.
I just want to say something important that was not said yet in the case. There was a letter that the previous, in 1944, way back, there was a Dr. Marx, Alexander Marx, who in his Jewish life was on the board of JTS in New York, and also he was very close to people in the State Department in Washington. And in 1944, the previous Rebbe, the owner of the library, sent a letter to Mr. Alexander Marx asking him to intervene that the books that are in at that time they were in Poland, that he left them when he left, he couldn't take his whole library with him. So the government put it in the warehouse and forgot about it, and found out that it was still in the warehouse, and that the books belong to Agudas Chassidic Chabad, not to him personally. Sifton in his ruling did not mention that fact to win the case, but in the appeals court, after we won the case on Teves, there was a 12-month period of appealing. Barry Garari appealed this victory that we're celebrating today, and as a matter of fact, the case with Sifton began in the 19th day of Kislev, and it ended in the last Friday in 1985. And he was going to Paris for a holiday, and he hadn't ruled, but the case was over. He was going to write his appeal in the beginning of January. What happened was that before he left, it was late Friday afternoon, December 31st, he asked for television to be brought before him. He wanted to see a part of the Rebbitzins' deposition. And he knew, somehow he knew, he must have told his people what he wanted to see. They had it on the Rebbitzins' deposition that was taken way before, at the end of the trial. And what he wanted to see was that piece where the Rebbitzin said that my father belonged to Chassidim and everything he owned belonged to Chassidim. And he said, and it belonged to Agudas Chassidic Chabad. So the truth of the matter is, it went a long way. The trial was very hard and very bitter and very sorrowful. But the Rebbe himself said, the owner of the library said, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to Agudas Chassidei Chabad. Why did he think it was the Rebbe's private rechush, the Rebbe's private his ownership? So it should be known that the victory was a victory, yes, but the library didn't belong to the Rebbe in the first place.
Can I add
Wait,
something?
and when the Katz Sifton saw that piece that I just mentioned, he put off the television. You know what he said? Remarkable.
Can I just add something to what Seth described about the government's position? And that is, Seth, you remember the last paragraph of the government's submission. They said at the very end, as Seth described, we're not sure what position we will take on the specific legal issue here. We're still considering that, whether we will stick by our earlier position or take a new position. But in the last paragraph, they expressed strong governmental support for the proposition that Chabad was entitled to the return of the books. So I would just like to highlight that, on this occasion, highlight that part of the government's brief as well.
Can I add, picking up on what you just said, Rabbi Krinsky, about the 19th of Kislev and the significance of that? The Supreme Court's request to the Solicitor General's office had been sitting in front of that office for many, many months. And the day that the Solicitor General's office issued its brief and submitted it to the Supreme Court was the 19th of Kislev.
Right.
The same date on which the Alter Rebbe was released from captivity in Russia. It's a wonderful parallel because, of course, you've taught me since I became involved in this case a decade ago that the books are like hostages, like human hostages. And I learned that from Nat and Eliza. And here we have the Solicitor General's brief being issued on that very important day. And that was, I thought, very, very beautiful and probably not a coincidence.
Steve, if you can give us an update on your end, where we're holding with our pursuit.
Sure. So Seth has eloquently described where we are with the Schneerson collection, the books that are imprisoned in Russia. Let me talk a little bit about the case involving the Rebbe's correspondence archive. And Chabad has been working to recover the Rebbe's correspondence archive, which contains more than 35 years of correspondence from the Rebbe. And in pursuit of this objective, Chabad appeared about a year ago in the Appellate Division Second Department. This is the state court in Brooklyn pursuing its claim. The case had been dismissed by the trial court judge on a preliminary motion. And that argument before the Appellate Division was, in my experience, incredibly unusual. Not only did the court talk about the legal issues and the factual issues and the standard for review, and that's very, very typical, but two of the justices on the panel came right out and criticized the arguments that were being made by the individual who is illegally and improperly retaining the Rebbe's correspondence archive. One of them said, the Rebbe was a very learned man. Why would he want one family to control his correspondence archives rather than Chabad itself? It doesn't make any sense. And another justice then turned to the lawyer who was representing this individual who's refusing to give back the correspondence archive. And he said, what is the right thing to do here? She said, do the right thing. She pointed a finger at the lawyer and said, do the right thing. You never, ever see that in an appellate argument with a judge saying to a lawyer, tell your client to do the right thing. It was just extraordinary. Then we waited a couple of months. We got the ruling from the Appellate Division, and the Appellate Division ruled in our favor, held that the case should not have been dismissed, sent it back to the the trial court. After that happened, immediately after that happened, as we were beginning to ramp up, we had served discovery on the other side. They filed a motion for summary judgment to try to end the case on a different technicality. And we opposed the motion. We went to the trial court in Brooklyn. We argued the motion. The trial court denied the summary judgment motion that this person had filed. A big victory for Chabad, and Chabad's case is proceeding. But what makes this case maybe so interesting for what we've been talking about is on the very day that the trial court issued its ruling, this individual holding the Rebbe's correspondence archives made a social media post. And in the social media post, he implied that he was going to destroy parts of the correspondence archive, that he was going to destroy some of those letters. And so, following the route that Nat had mapped out many, many years before, we filed an application for a temporary restraining order with the judge, went in front of the judge, and got a temporary restraining order, which prohibited this individual from transporting or delivering or modifying or altering or selling or destroying any portion of the correspondence archive. And a very interesting twist, and it's one of those facts that you just can't make up. The day that temporary restraining order issued was also the 19th of Kislev. So we now have a temporary restraining order against this individual, and we'll be going forward with the case to try to recover physical possession of the correspondence archive. That's where we are.
Well, thank you, Steve. I know that many of Chabad community look to the Rebbe's correspondence archive, and not just Chabad community, but people around the world, as their sustenance when they read and they read the Rebbe's letters. And I understand there's over 20,000 letters just in English that the Rebbe had penned that are yet to be that we're seeking to have returned back to 770, where the Rebbe cried out he wants all of his manuscripts and books and all of his correspondence held. So that's a big task, and yesher koach to you, Steve, to you and to your team working on this.
Thank you.
I want to say something to Nat, Mr. Lewin. I was a very good friend of Zalman Garari from my youth, because there were times that the previous Rebbe sent him to Boston to take care of certain matters that had to be dealt with, and he stood at home. When I came to the yeshiva in New York when I was 12 years old, he was the principal, and he had put me in a class. He registered me. But I meant to say that when it came to this thing with this trial, I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't even know if the Rebbe would not fire me for going in without his permission and taking the Garari to court. I went on a hope and a prayer, and when I came in to tell the Rebbe that I did it, I was shaking, and I didn't consult anybody, not even family. I didn't hear from Zalman Garari. Didn't know what I was doing, and then nobody knew what I was doing, and I didn't know whether how I'm going to survive this. And it turned out that this was a godsend, and this was the key. I just want to say that Zalman Garari, I knew him well, in all the years that Nat and I were involved with the Hanukkah case, which was like 10 years. We worked together very closely. Where are you, Nat? You remember Hanukkah? We did with Hanukkah. You did it. You made Hanukkah a Jewish holiday, and to the extent that we can't even measure it anymore, how great it is. That a radio or television station that doesn't wish everybody a happy Hanukkah, amongst other things. So
Maybe
I-
our section was right when he said, after my father tells a story about how when the Supreme Court issued its decision in the menorah case, it was the very last day. So he knew, so he went to the court to go listen because it was the last day of the term. And well, why don't you tell the story of what happened, who was sitting there and who told you?
Well, sitting in the row in front of me in the attorney's section was the head of the DC ACLU, I think, a
Yeah.
Jewish fellow. I forget.
Or
Spitzer, right.
Spitzer, right.
So the court Blackman announces this decision. There's a whole bunch of cases all decided that Monday, because in those days, the court would only issue decisions on Mondays. But anyway, it's all decided and court adjourns for the year. And everybody's getting up, and I get up from my seat, and Spitzer's in the row in front of me in the lawyer's section. So he is and I are parallel as we're walking out of the lawyer section to go out of the courthouse. And he turns to me. He was on the other side, of course. He was arguing that it was unconstitutional to have a menorah on Pittsburgh's holiday display. And we won on having a menorah there. And he turns to me and he says, "Congratulations, Nat. You've turned this into a Jewish nation." That the decision that upheld the menorah turned the United States into a Jewish nation. That was his statement to me when the Supreme Court decided its case.
So I don't know that it's gone that far, but it has definitely helped make Hanukkah a recognized celebration where Jews across America and around the world can celebrate openly and proudly.
And December 25th is now Hey Teves.
I should say, with finishing this conversation, if you recall, the decision of the court allowing the Hanukkah menorah to be in with Pittsburgh, as you mentioned just now, but it affected many cities in the United States that had menorahs already. It came on July 3rd, 1989. The next day was July 4th. Every single newspaper in the United States of America had a front page story about the Hanukkah victory. Isn't that appropriate for the 4th of July, Independence?
Yeah. Well, this is beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Kwinsky. I'd be remiss if I didn't make mention of the fact that I know Nat said to begin with that he's been involved with the menorah case. Seth has been involved with menorah, but it wouldn't be known to anyone. But Steve Lieberman, the first job or the first task that he's taken on was defending a menorah that was put up. So I guess we have a great team here, along with Bob Parker, defending the Rebbe's library and all having to deal with defending the menorah. So I think this is go ahead.
I say we won.
We did win. We did win with that. We can finish this off with the L'chaim, Rabbi Kwinsky, if you want to give us a last thought before we close the meeting.
I think this whole discussion was the last thought. We're talking about the history, the tremendous victory of the Svarim, and the victory of Hanukkah. Look what we gotta keep on winning. What does the president say? Mr. Trump, you gotta keep on winning.
Amen.
All right, then. Thank you all. And this is a Chag Shebachagim. This is the holiday of holidays. So let us celebrate the Hey Teves victory with the continued victories of the Rebbe speedily in our time.
Amen.